Well, earlier on the Arise interview, the former MD and CEO of Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading, Rumundaka Wanodi, and the former spokesman for Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, Bode Fadikpe, spoke about Nigeria's electricity crisis.
It boils down to a leadership issue that, I've always said that there is a leadership gap within the sector. And you listen to the growls of the workers of the union. Some of them I might not personally agree with, but if it's an agreement that somebody signed, you have to start by respecting it. And if you do not like it, you should look at renegotiating it. If the workers say that there's a career path for them, that you want to become a principal manager, then you're going to move to an AGM position once it's vacant, then maybe you should respect that. I personally do not agree. I think that there should be some competence and some evaluation of the personnel to make sure that competent people are going to, high management positions. AGM is not you lead sections, you lead regions of the TCN and what have you, right? But if that's the agreement, maybe respect it. I don't think it's the way it should, but you have to renegotiate. You cannot unilaterally change it. Right? So I don't know whether it's an agreement, but if it were, you just need to respect it. Do I agree with things like that? That's a totally different thing.
I mean, that's a very good foundation for this discussion. I come to you, Bode. Should we describe this as a sabotage by the electricity workers?
No, I won't describe it as a sabotage. Rather, because they gave government ample opportunity for negotiation.
But this looked like administrative issues.
Yes, it is administrative issues, but it also affects the manpower, and that's the most important component of any organization for that matter. The cameras that are in this studio will not function without somebody behind the cameras. The bolts and nuts will not get to where they are without somebody going up there. No matter the level of technology that is in the world today, you still need human beings to put those things to work. So, and one thing that we may not have really attended to right from the time of privatization is the human element in the sector. Everybody was grouped together with, I don't even know the amount of network audits that we did before the sector was finally handed over to the investors. Now, that's a different conversation entirely. But coming to the human element, the human capital, how much audits did we do to ensure that we actually got the right people to work, put them in the right frame of mind? Because if you go through the entire spectrum of the current power sector, one thing you will still find there is that you still find people who work with the mindset of, look, we are who we are. Nobody can put us under any kind of questioning. And I don't think that the private sector...
that sounds like people who are inherited from ECN to NEPA.
It's not impossible. It's not impossible. But you need to take them through an orientation that will show that, look, we are moving from the public service that maybe do things the way they want to a private system that must deliver on service. The issue of moving from principal manager to AGM is just one of it. There is another one that the unions are even complaining about, and it is that the head of service of this country issued a circular saying that those who worked in the power sector of yesterday that were disengaged can no longer work in any of the publicly owned agencies in the power sector. And I ask, how do you design that kind of circular in this country? Assuming, for instance, without considering that somebody joined at the age of 25 and at the age of 30, at the age of 35, the sector was privatized. It was disengaged. Are you saying that at the age of 35, it can no longer work because it was disengaged, that it can no longer work in a public institution? That is even against Nigeria's constitution. It's an affront on the fundamental human right of that Nigerian.
Well, Arise News analyst Dr. Sam Amadi joins us now for more. He's a former chairman and CEO of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NEC. So you understand these issues. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Yeah. Hopefully. Okay, so from what we understand, let's break it down, is that these are employment-related issues, conditions of service, career progressions, promotion, examination, interview, the workers not wanting to do that. Are those reasons justifiable to plunge the nation into darkness?
I think no reasons are justifiable to throw the country to darkness, because essentially this kind of situation can only arise in emergency, real emergency, system collapse, military attack, or some kind of hurricane. So the fact that we live with everyday total blackout kind of sedate us to the extraordinariness of this kind of outage all over the country. So basically, no justification, but again, it goes to the frailty of our system, the way it was designed. When I was a chairman, I had a conversation with at the villa with the president and some other officials, and I noted that ours was the only profession in the world where you paid off workers, promoted them, increased the salary by 50%, and they're still in the sector. The haste and the extreme commitment to privatize made government over pamper the still workers. Second thing, like someone talk about audit, staff manning, there are critical issues to deal with in terms of human personnel and change management, human resources that we didn't take care of. If you look at the original National Electric Power Policy, the idea was to first corporatize, commercialize, then you enter into privatization. So we have done that. We would have established proper corporate behavior standards, which would have been the things that would deal with these issues of personnel and all that. So we just privatized, and of course we had TCN that was not privatized, and we didn't focus on helping TCN develop even good enough corporate governance. So take, for example, the issue of promotion. I mean, why should we sign up to what doesn't make sense? Even when I was chairman of NEC, you don't promote anybody, so there's vacancy, and then the staff who occupy the next office is primed and willing and able to discharge the requirement. So it's not even a given. But some of these sweetheart deals were done, basically to calm them down, to allow this to go ahead. So Ajero, very dogged guy and strong, always winning government, has the right to say, look, this is an agreement signed, you have to obey it. They take the issue around market operator bringing money to pay ex-NEPA staff. Now, this solidarity of workers, because by the way, there are also check-off dues from all those states. So the incentive for the union to protect those who have been already gone. So they need to be paid, and maybe the market operator says they're not going to pay them from market funds, which are regulated funds. They're going to pay them perhaps from government, since they are public workers, whatever it is. So these issues are weighty from the perspective of workers, welfare, well-being. But should they translate to switch off a total darkness? I don't think so. But whose fault is it? The labor union is a maximalist. He maximizes opportunity for the well-being of workers that he leads. So
but he could be guilty of misuse of opportunity. And is it a case of impunity and sabotage, just like Somna asked earlier in that the Rise interview? Is that what it is? Shouldn't somebody really be paying for this? I mean, you plunge the whole... There should be consequences, shouldn't there?
I think the first people to pay consequences should be the ministers and the managers of the system, by the way.
Especially which ministers now are you talking
Primarily the Minister of Power. I overheard the Minister of Power say
that their demands have nothing to do with the power.
It sounded to me silly to say that the well-being of workers in your ministry, whose action totally destroys the basis of your ministry, which is power, is not your responsibility. Yes, labor relations have an umbrella management, but the issues that trigger them, and somebody has to make them a matter of urgency. So look at the time lag in which these matters were simmering. The Minister of Power's responsibility, because they're the ones who also make appointments to these boards. They take the advantage of appointing their cronies whoever they like to the boards, but it's responsible to make sure that those boards and those entities parasitic under their control are actively, issues to deal with them, head of the crisis. So yes, if you say it's a matter of somebody should pay for it, you start with those who could not properly channel these discussions, create a closure. Now they have agreed, they have now rushed to have a committee headed by the Minister of State for Power. In 2 weeks, the magic, just 2 weeks to solve this problem. So which means it was actually solvable. And now
Can they even solve it in 2 weeks?
Now look at the economic costs, social dislocation costs that you've caused by failure, this inefficiency. So in 2 ways, I would say, look at the laws. The laws allow the procedures for industrial disputes and the processes for, the ways to process them. Now, if the action of the labor electricity workers go beyond outside the law, then there are issues that you can actionable, the state can take up. But if it's because they have leverage on a normal tool available to them, which is
a strike.
To strike, and that strike is at a sensitive sector.
Yeah.
So you have two options. One is to preempt it in the future, maybe through possible legislation that is fair and effective. Because look, we need to have power all the time, even as small as we have it, as well as chaotic and epileptic as we have it.
Indeed.
So I would say that, look, this is a test of leadership. And we failed woefully because we are now rushing.
Yeah, but government says
into
it's
4 hours.
acting fast to address electricity, workers' demands.
The lawyers say, res ipso loquito, let the matter speak for itself.
Okay, so from what you have said now, I mean, this is a maximal action that was taken, extreme action by the workers. However, they hold on to something, an agreement that was signed to, sweetheart deals, you call them.
Yeah.
Does all of this not point to us taking a second look at the privatization of the sector? Looks like we were in a hurry, we signed off deals, and we are paying the consequences now as a nation.
My biggest sin in the sector was they weren't saying, make haste slowly, corporatize fully, commercialize fully. If you look at the history, and by the way, before I came to the job, I wrote a book on privatization, and I said, following from Stiglitz views and others, that it's rarely done well. If you look at countries in the world, whether it's India, China, UK, post-privatization, you're going to have problems. But the good thing is that they had capacity. You have countries where you had enough power, but it was inefficiently traded. So you need to reform. We didn't have power. And so instead of us to focus on corporatizing well, inducing discipline, and gradually open to privatization. So we overlook many things. For example, staff manning audit. You look at the people they want to take to AGM. If you look at the way we started recruiting, when I went to NEC, it was a trouble for me. I needed to balance it. You need to remove many people and get the people who can get the job done. But they have a tenure. They have guarantees.
Right.
So if you look at the TCM people, you want to take them to AGM. It's like you are promoting people to the level of their incompetence. So the management can say, wait a minute, we want to interview these guys and make sure they're fit for purpose. But the groundwork, the structural issues around how you started these entities. And all these years when we're supposed to have redefined them, we are focused too much on privatizing. So if you look at 2005, when the reform started with NEC, and then was truncated by Yar'Adua, restarted by Jonathan in 2010, everything we did was to head straight to privatization. We used to write then board. We used to coordinate with government to set up proper board, professional board, to run these entities. By now, we would have gotten structures that are well running.
So
then
the
you privatize. So in my sense,
are really, really deep.
The problem is that there's a structural crisis, the incoherence in the layout of the market, and we missed milestones, we missed critical elements of a orderly working market before headed straight to privatization.
So what's the way forward now? You have the discos privatized, though they say government still has about 40% or so, and the GENCOs. The TCN is fully still in the hands of government. You have the picketing there today. There have been calls that the TCN, the transmission company, should be fully privatized. Will that solve will it begin to solve the problem?
It will collapse the system, and I tell you why. We privatize with a whole lot of incoherence and inefficiency. Look at TCN is critical. You need high level of coordination. This is the handshake between disco and the generation. Any little slip in that sector, everything collapses. For example, these guys throw us into confusion by just switching off something, okay? Now, if a disco collapses, like Abuja, it can only affect us, those who in that franchise area.
Localized.
So you need to, if you want to privatize TCN with the level of our competence and project management and even modeling, we're going to confuse everybody. What we need now first is maybe regionalization. Secondly, the Act talked about creating an independent system operator and the transmission system unbundling. Unbundle it, maybe create a non-profit TCN, which is not government owned, it's not privatized. It's a common services. Okay. Like you have over the country, some countries have it. It's public, non-profit, but publicly owned by all the market players. We need to look at a solution that will help us to be efficient, not just sign on to ideology of market. There's really nobody who has the capacity and incentive to invest in this market in the sense of, okay, somebody come and buy our transmission service and give us first-grade service. Today, we have no SCADAs to run technology-based coordination in this market. we are doing patch and patch, and that's why you have this crisis. So if you now privatize the typical Nigerian way, and then some Nigerian smart guys leverage on MOUs, access to bank financialization. They get good paper, give you good proposals that have no corporate experience and no real finance to track it. Then you come to a moment where the thing collapses and it will be total. So I think what we need now is regionalize, properly corporatize, create efficient board. Stop this. TCN is being run by
but the argument that the power sector was already commercialized long before it was. It was never.
How can I commercialize? I did the first audit account of the whole sector in 2012. Commercialized. Till today, there are no scientifically verifiable customer numbers. Wow. Many of these entities are not properly real figures. So how can I say a commercialized? A commercialized entity that, look at Egypt we'll talk about now. They're not yet privatized, but they're running entities that are fully commercialized and corporately run. So if you're an investor, you see through. Part of what the discourse investors are complaining that they took over, they didn't know this was how bad things are. Why is it that bad? Because the fundamental elements of corporatizing and commercializing was not done. And the logic is this, which is now faulty. The neoliberal market logic is that once you change capital ownership, then you create a lot of efficiency.
Dr. Sam Amadi, before we let you go, there's a point that's been raised here. But NEPA, let me just put it the way the person put it, but NEPA was commercialized by the Technical Committee on Privatization and Commercialization, that's the PC, under the IBB administration.
That's the kind of thing BP put out. What's commercialized? He created a committee. He said commercializing is a deepening the market process, financial. I give you an example. A commercial entity has no audited account. What's commercializing? An entity that doesn't know its customer base. Up to today, there are no clarity. If you say, what's the customer of Abuja Disco? They will say, Abuja will claim something, regulator claims something.
Estimation.
That's so, how can someone say, this entity is not commercialized properly for us, even up to now? You can argue. For example, are you commercialized when you can't do willing buyer, willing seller? You have no credit part to show people to transact with you. You need to create a bulk trader.
So what was the 2012 audit about? What exactly was it about? Because it was commercialized under IBB.
No, just to 2012, which is my own.
Which you did.
Is an audit to say, show us the book. What's the debt and obligations and the income of this company? You have a company. Audit the account.
Right.
No audit. That was the first time we did it across the discourse. The point I'm trying to make is this. If we were fully commercialized, you didn't need to have a bulk trader. The work of the bulk trader is that the investor says, we can't trust this entity, it has no commercial character. Create something that can backstop this transaction. So the point I'm making is that what we are harvesting today is that failure to redesign and reform the sector before we privatize it. Even if TCN remains in government hand, it could better run. You can have strong systems. For example, up to now, boards, ask yourself, is it TCN properly, well, just recently they announced a board. Do you have proper boards with all the committees, audit, working, and then a regulator overseeing what they are doing like any other regulated market? The government puts it away, it becomes part of public sector, the parastatals, they're managing how they like. You can't enter into a market having those kind of dysfunctionalities and incoherence and expect that. Why should anybody shut down the network because of argument over PM to GAGM? Something that should be managed at back room. Maybe the regulator will be the one they write to, who will not step in and say, you know what, based on your rules, these guys have been promoted.
And we know that there will be real consequences for these actions today. But Dr. Sam Amadi, you said something in passing that a lot of these people came into the sector not knowing what was on the ground. Who goes into a business such as this
not counting the cost?
Well, that's what I said. That's agreement today. They said they didn't allow them. For example, the government had a very wrong approach in the sense that they paid off these guys. These guys were still there. So Nigerian guys refused entry. So these guys are saying, by the time we took over, we didn't even have a opportunity to conduct due diligence. We only relied on BPE's what they call data center, where they tell you.
Dr. Sam Amadi will have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us and helping us to understand this detail.